This is an open letter to my friends in Uncle Sam's land. A few nights ago, I was listening to a podcast. I think what it's called. And it was a conversation between one was an ex-CIA agent, ex-current, who knows, and the other one was similar, ex-CIA, ex-special forces, ex-something, both very, committed to what, who knows. Somewhere in the middle of the conversation, the guy, the CIA guy, ex-CIA guy, whatever, turned around and said, yeah, do you remember how good it was during after 9/11, immediately after 9/11, that everybody was on the same page and everybody was united and everybody was uh, united behind a cause. I'm not sure exactly what that cause was, but he was going on and on that how good it was and how good it would be to that environment to come back and blah 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 blah. Ouch. Yeah, it got me thinking what he said. First of all, this is exactly the kind of thing that just begs for a false flag operation, a red flag operation, in which, again, if one can hit oneself in the face, then one can supposedly unite the people again, the way they were united immediately after 9/11. I mean, then that further got me down the path of, yeah, that is true in case of all nations, all groups, that when there is an external threat, there is more unity inside within the unit when there is an external threat. That's true with all nations, all groups of people, all packs of animals, and every group becomes a little more united, a little more cohesive when there is an external threat. Okay, that's fine. But very few of these packs or these groups, these nations, are actively seeking an external threat. Very few of these nations are actively seeking an external threat because they feel their cloth is becoming undone. The cloth that they have woven, the society that they have, is becoming undone. Therefore, we need an external threat to keep it together. Most nations in 21st century Earth, I should say most homogeneous, cohesive, homogeneous nations don't actively need to seek an external threat to keep it together. Very few nations who are not homogeneous, it seems, have to constantly look for an external threat or even make up an external threat, imagine an external threat, come up with an external threat, because their very survival as a unit depends on it. That's fucked up. Here's where I'm going with this. My friends in Uncle Sam's land, I love you, I love Uncle Sam, I love the whole idea. But I'm slowly reaching the same conclusion that Miss Marjorie Taylor Greene has reached. Now it's common that many progressives love to hate her guts, but I don't. But some of the things that she says make sense, although she probably don't know how it makes sense. She probably can't reason behind it, but she has the answer. And one of the things that she said recently was that maybe we need a national divorce. Because here's the thing. Now here is the explanation of Miss Marjorie Taylor Greene's conclusion. Here is the she has got the answer to the equation. And the equation is, but I can describe why that the answer is maybe it's a national divorce. The why part of it is that I feel you have such a heterogeneous society such as Uncle Sam's land, you have an unworkable equation going on in the society. It's an unworkable equation. What does that mean? What I mean by that is that in heterogeneous societies from so many different cultures and so many different races, and here's the thing, when I say race, what I mean is imagine you have a pack of wolves and golden retrievers. You have 5-6 golden retrievers mixed with 5-6 wolves. You have a mixed pack of canines. Now it's understood that the golden retrievers are dogs which are descendant from wolves, and they're pretty much the same. Maybe even they can reproduce with each other. They're that closely related. And also you have jackals, and you have not jackals, sorry, you have wild dogs, and then you have jackals, and you have all these smaller branches from the canine family. But we're just going to go with the wolf and the golden retriever. When you have a pack of a mix of wolves and golden retrievers, what happens when you raise your stick? As soon as you raise a big stick, the golden retrievers will submit, lay down, roll over, and expose their bellies. It's sort of that's how they show submission, and they're expecting you to rub their bellies as the dominant party to that group, that pack. As a human ruling that pack of canines, you would be considered the dominant as far as the golden retrievers are concerned. You're the law. You're the guy with the big stick. You can analyze. You can. That's very similar to the big stick. You can make it understand it to be the law. You know, a group, and then there is the law, and without hesitation, the golden retrievers submit. What happens that the wolves don't take notice of your stick, and as soon as you raise the stick, they feel threatened. Not only they don't submit, but as soon as you raise the stick, they feel threatened, and they start attacking you. No submission. They start attacking you because you raise the stick. You raise the law. You are the law, supposedly. So my point is this. Although even they're from the same species, supposedly, the wolves and the golden retrievers, but they react differently to the same stimuli. They react totally opposite, in 180 degrees opposite, towards the same stimuli, because their brain is wired differently. The brain, literally, the connections are wired differently. Is wired differently. They 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 dance to their own tune. They dance to their own vibrations. They work based on different vibrations. I mean, when I say vibrations, imagine that. I want you to imagine that, you know, uh, um, Bjork is the top. For example, this is just off the top of my head. Bjork is the most well-known musician from Iceland. Native to Iceland is Bjork, who basically the Icelandic people and a lot of people within that vibration like her music. To many in Central Africa, that's not music. That's just noise. But then in Central Africa, they create such beats that stimulates themselves, that, you know, as soon as they hear a beat, they start moving and moving and shaking and moving. So it's just, you can tell that these people, different vibration moves them, different vibration stimulates them. All of this, I'm saying all of this to say that if you have a heterogeneous society, really heterogeneous society, you can't, first of all, it's very difficult to keep under control, keep order in a very heterogeneous society, because not everyone hears the same thing, it reacts the same way to the same stimuli. Not everyone in this if it's homogeneous society, like a society in, let's say, Finland, let's say Sweden, if it's a homogeneous society, let's say Iraq, let's say Syria, let's say Somalia, countries that have not accepted too many refugees from outside, too many others from outside. In these countries, homogeneous countries, everybody gets the same meaning from the same words that are being uttered. When you say something to them, everybody more or less takes the same meaning in their brain, because their brains are more or less connected the same way. But in a heterogeneous society, as I explained, nobody takes away the same meaning from the same stimuli, the same words that has been uttered to everyone. Not everybody understands it the same way. Not everybody takes back the same meaning. So ruling, controlling, creating order in these heterogeneous societies where everybody takes a different, understands the matter to be different, because their brain works differently, the connections are different, is very difficult. And what happens in these heterogeneous societies is that you have to rule, you have to make the laws based on the lowest common denominator. So you have to find the dumbest motherfuckers in the society, and you have to make laws that would, you know, prevent those really stupid motherfuckers from, you know, behaving stupidly. But these laws make life miserable for others who, even without these laws, wouldn't behave so irresponsibly. This is what I'm trying to get at. I mean, This is one example. I state an example here. Maybe it becomes much more clear. In Europe, they have much more relaxed laws with regards to drinking. Much more relaxed. You can have a drink with your. They fucking sell a beer in McDonald's or Burger King or whatever. Along with your, burger, you can have a soda or you can have a beer. But this is not the case in the United States. Because there are strict laws. I, for example, experienced one of them a few nights ago, in which I just went, I got on a bicycle and went for a ride. I got to the beach, had half a can of beer. I'm not a big drinker, so just half a can of beer, and the rest of it, I felt, I didn't feel like I should throw it out. I put the remaining half of the beer in my basket on the bike, and I started pedaling back home. And as always, I only drive the bicycle on pedestrian walkway. I don't go on the road because, danger. So I was here around 9 o'clock at night. It was just turned dark. Around 9 o'clock at night, in a pedestrian walkway, not on the road, on a pedestrian walkway, and I had half a can of beer on my bike and half a can of beer on me. And everything was fine, and I was just going, and I see a police car just, make a U-turn and stop right in front of me, very, very commando-like. And a kid came out of the car. I don't think this kid who just, came out of the police car, I don't think he was not, he hadn't reached the drinking limit, because he had a lot of pimples on his face, pimples that you get during the teenage years. I don't think he was 21. I don't think he could be legally drinking in Uncle Sam's land. But he came out of the car, and he told me what I had done wrong, and that was I hadn't turned on my bicycle's light, the back light and the front light, which supposedly you have to turn them, both of them on, have lights on your bicycle at night. Although I was in a pedestrian sidewalk, I don't feel necessary to turn on lights if you're on the pedestrian sidewalk and there are street lights. You can see, and people can see you and you're on pedestrian sidewalk. There is, if there is enough light on the street, that everybody can see you and you can see everyone, I don't see what's and you're on the pedestrian sidewalk. I'm not sure what's the point of having your lights on the bicycle. Anyway, I was stopped. I was told, as soon as he stopped me, I realized that my lights are not on, so I turned on my lights. I gave him my ID, and he looked at my ID, and he checked it with his station, and everything was fine. And meanwhile, another police car pulled up. Now they have two police officers stopping this, infringement of the law, riding around on a bicycle without lights on, without its lights on. So, and now after that, while he's looking up my card, he noticed my half can of beer in my basket. Apparently, in the United States of America, you cannot have open container of alcohol. You cannot consume alcohol in public, period. Not even a beer. And it's very odd. It's like you can't. Is it an Islamic country in which you cannot? We all know in Islamic countries everybody drinks at home. So what's the fucking difference between an Islamic country and Uncle Sam's land when you're pushing everybody to only drink on private property? When you're on public property, you can't drink. Is Islamic. This is the same thing. In Islamic countries, you can drink at home, behind closed doors, or you can go drink in your friend's party, or you can drink in a wedding behind closed doors, but you can't drink in public. Same thing. So, well, at that time, the conversation turned into why you have a half can of beer on your bicycle and you are drunk. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't, even I don't get drunk on half can of beer. No, I'm not drunk. Anyway, they were nice enough to, force me to empty the can of beer, and I got off with a warning. Like, thank you very much. I left. They left me alone. But the point is this: first, because I wasn't really drunk, and second, because I guess they were nice about it. But the point is this: if you, the reason, my point is this: the reason they have set the laws such a strict laws, have to set such, as opposed to, let's say, European countries, where you get, during lunch you can have a beer with your Big Mac in Europe. But as opposed to Europe, why they have to set, they have set such strict laws in the United States, is it seems that this heterogeneous population, some members of this mixture, this melting pot, may go on a rampage on half a can of beer. They may go on rampage without beer. It's because the brain works differently. So they have to, set the laws and to set the rules to match the lowest common denominator. And the lowest common denominator is a guy whose brain is wired as such that he may go on a rampage on half a beer. So everybody else has to be restricted tightly within every with regards to every matter, be it alcohol, be it drugs, be it driving, be it walking, be it running, be it riding your bicycle, be it everything. With regards to everything, all laws has to be very strict in order to make the society function, because they have to set the law to match the lowest common denominator, to try to prevent that crazy guy from behaving crazy because of small stimuli. Now even we have to ban that small stimuli because that guy will act crazy even with the slightest stimuli. So my point is this: heterogeneous societies are an unworkable equation. And it seems to me Uncle Sam's managers have been specially going to foreign wars against either Cold War or Warm World, or a mixture of Cold Wars and Warm Wars, hot wars, has always been necessary, as far as the managers of Uncle Sam's business have seen it, have always been necessary in order to keep this heterogeneous system that is always on the verge of coming apart together. It seems to me, especially since the right around civil rights disturbances from the 50s and 60s, right around there, up to World War One, World War Two, it maybe was too restrictive, maybe it wasn't. I'm not sure, but I don't. At least the managers of Uncle Sam's business didn't have to you know, didn't seem that they have to go actively looking for an enemy or inventing an enemy in order to keep this heterogeneous society together at home. So you see, it seems right around after civil right disturbances, after when the system in Uncle Sam's land had to really mix up and accept accept all the races coming, being mixed in the society. Right from around that time, there was a tendency to, be to go active, to participate in foreign wars, to go after foreign wars, bring about foreign wars. We are talking about Gulf of Tonkin, from the Gulf of Tonkin to, to uh, all that interference in Central America and South America and Africa and Asia and East Asia and West Asia. And it seems constantly the system is trying to fight an external enemy even if there isn't one. Invent an external enemy even if there isn't one. Russia would not be in a war with Ukraine if Ukraine was not stimulated to join the NATO. If Ukraine, if Uncle Sam's managers hadn't cozied up so much to the corrupt Ukrainians, to a faction of corrupt Ukrainians, if Uncle Sam's managers hadn't cozied up so much to them, this war that up to now apparently has killed up to 50,000 people would not have happened. This cozying up has triggered the paranoid Russians. Whether they have reason to be paranoid or not, maybe not, I don't know. But what is the point of creating a war just because you want to cozy up to somebody else's neighbor? It seems that constantly the system is looking for a fight externally, looking to stimulate a fight, create an enemy, or make an enemy, or describe an enemy. It's always this idea of pivot towards Asia, pivot towards now. We lick the small powers. Now it's time to Now it's time for great power rivalry. The small powers such as Iraq and Syria and Somalia, and we smashed them to bits and pieces. Now it's time for great power rivalry. I'm sorry, if you, again, as per Miss Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think she's right. If your system is so dysfunctional, if your equation is so unsolvable because of the heterogeneous society that you have put together, and it's very dysfunctional, and everybody is very frustrated, both because of the heterogeneous environments of different races and religions and all of that, and because of the pressures that capitalism has put on people. Consumerism and capitalism, these extra pressures on the already fragile construct of this different races and religions, all of that has made people extremely frustrated in the United States. I've never seen, I've traveled a lot, I've seen a lot, but I can say for sure that my Uncle Sam's populace, Uncle Sam's people are one of the most frustrated, angry societies that I've come across. Very frustrated, very angry with each other, with anybody, with everybody. it seems that the law is coming down hard because of the law is devised based on lowest common denominator. So almost everything is restricted in the United States. In the land of the free, everything is very restricted. Very. With you can start from alcohol to drugs that they're much more restrictive in the United States than in Europe. I mean, in Norway, I actually witnessed that the police know where the drug addicts are, and they just they tolerate them because for whatever reason they have lost their way in life, or this is how they're trying to get through life, and blah 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 blah. Police tolerates them, and the drug addicts tolerate the police, and the police tolerates them, and the whole environment is such that okay, let's see how we can help these folks to get back on their feet. Whereas in the United States, it's sort of like lock them up, shoot them, let them rot. It's I'm sorry, but laws are say no to drugs. Absolutely not. No to drugs, no to alcohol, no to this, no to that, no to prostitution, no to alcohol, no to drugs, no to this, no to that, no to the other. I'm sorry, in the land of free, there is, as opposed to, for example, European countries who don't scream at the top of their lungs that they are very free, they're free. They don't scream that, but they have much more freedom, and they tolerate a lot more than what is tolerated in the United States. And it seems to be this is the problem, is that the United States has to devise laws based on lowest common denominator. And and when you have such a heterogeneous society, your lowest common denominator is very low. So every little thing that can go wrong, they have to come up with laws to prevent it from going wrong. Every little thing. So it becomes very restrictive. You can't walk without looking over to your shoulder to see if the police is behind you, and what did you do wrong this time that the police is up your ass. Because everything is against the law. You want to do anything, you go on your private property and do it, because outside in the public space, almost beside going to work and coming home, everything else is illegal. There is no leeway. There is no, we understand you like to have a drink by the beach, now you're going home, you're not bothering anybody, we're gonna leave you alone. No, 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 no. The lights on your bicycle is not on. In a pedestrian walkway, when there are street has lights, it's sort of like it's constantly this suppression. The police has to be coming down hard. Why? Not because of me, because there are some members of the society whose brain is wired differently. So the police has to come on down hard, and the laws have to be very restrictive in order to deal with the few or a bunch whose brain is wired differently, and may go on a rampage on a dime, just with half a beer. This is a society that is always, constantly, is on the verge of coming apart, and it has to be forced together constantly to prevent it coming apart. How? One, by strictly controlling the mass, controlling the domestic environment by strict laws and creating some external enemy in order to keep some kind of unity within this system that is constantly wants to separate, fall apart, dissociate. You gotta constantly looking out for external enemies, and this has been the case, especially since the civil rights movement, especially since the society was forced to accommodate all its members and come together, forced together, the neighborhoods and workplaces and neighborhoods and all of that. It's making the society worse. People are becoming more frustrated. The members of the society are becoming more frustrated. You see that's the case, that when you see, you know, a lot of young white kids who don't have a girlfriend or a wife or whatever, and you know, want a wife, want a girlfriend, blah blah blah. They can't get none, but then and they see with their own eyes that, you know, white girls are going, you know, all over the black guys in the society, and that actively is creating frustration. Now, why is that? How is that? That's beside the point. The point is the heterogeneous society has created an environment of frustration. And this frustration, like the CIA guy said, the only way we can cure this frustration and madness and resentment is to find an external enemy. Create an external enemy. If we can, you know, distract all our people by finding an external enemy and, you know, send these frustrated young boys to take out their frustration in Iraq, in Afghanistan, then our society may be able to keep together. No, I'm sorry, but the planet, the rest of the people on this fucking planet are suffering, paying, because you're trying to solve an unworkable equation, unsolvable equation. Because you're trying to solve an unsolvable equation that is keeping together such a vastly heterogeneous society, forcefully trying to keep together such a vastly heterogeneous society, the rest of the fucking people on the planet have to suffer, because who knows whose name is gonna come up next. Is Brazil going to be the next enemy? Russia? South Africa? China? India? Who's the next enemy? Let's find one. Because we need to, you know, distract our frustrated society with some kind of external enemy. Because our frustrated, mad, boiling society, due to boiling, frustrated, mad because of this, you know, this not everybody thinking the same, not everybody having the same perceptions in life, the laws being very restrictive in order to keep order in the society. This frustrated, mad, restrictive society that is being clamped down with laws and police and law enforcement, in order to distract these people and keep the unity, we constantly gotta go to war. Everybody else in this planet has to suffer because we want to keep our unity. Really? Is it worth it? For whom is it worth it, this unity? Yeah, the unity is good for Exxon, Mobil, Microsoft, Apple, the owners and the top shareholders. The unity is great. They don't have to, pay too many taxes when they're building something in 3 4 different locations, and these parts and products have to be relocated and move around. If there were different countries, they had to keep paying taxes, transportation taxes for the parts and products to go in and out, in and out. It would cost them more. Let's put it this way: Apple would be less profitable if it had to work with, you know, it had to produce in 5 different countries. What I'm trying to say is the only entities that benefit from the unity, forced unity, not regular unity is great, but forced unity, the only entities that benefit from this forced unity are large corporations. They only have to deal with one set of politics, one set of politicians, one border, all of that. One police force, one FBI, one this, one that, all of that. But the people if are suffering the most. People both within, domestically, in Uncle Sam's land, because they're being very restricted, because the laws are for based on lowest common denominator, and the police clamp down because they have to, again, police based on lowest common denominator. I give you another example of the police clamp down. Once I was driving from Arizona to California, and I made a wrong U-turn, and the police stopped me. Now I'm sitting in the car. Now, if it was any other country, that is, people are not armed, you get out of the car, the police is not worried. In fact, the police in the shithole that I'm from, the police actually goes and stops in front of your car, not behind your car, in front of your car. And by the time, and you are supposed to get out of your car and go and talk to the police in his car. He doesn't leave his fucking car. This is how, when people are not armed, you go to the police. But if the where 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 people are suspected of being armed, so the police parked behind me. This is what happened in California. The police car parked behind me. I'm supposed to not get out of the car, because once, many years ago, I got out of the car, as usual. It was in my shed hole. I got out of the car out of respect for the police. I got out of the car when I was stopped, in which case the police, went for his gun and said, "Go back in the car, sit in the car." Like, okay, I will. Anyway, so as usual, I remained seated in the car, and the police approached me from behind, got out, approached me, not from the regular left-hand side where I'm sitting and driving, from the other side. But since I was in a van, he basically had to sneak up, and his hand was on his gun. Fuck. His hand was on his gun. I had to. He opened the door on my on the other side, not all the way, but opened the door, because he has to assume that I'm armed and I'm crazy. This is how the police has to police in the United States, because they have to assume that everyone they stop is armed and crazy, because it's a heterogeneous society. They have come across people who have been armed and crazy. Therefore, they have to treat everyone as if they're armed and crazy. This is something a police in Norway doesn't have to deal with. This is something in police in Sweden, This is something in police in the shithole that I'm from in the Middle East doesn't have to deal with. They don't expect people to be armed and crazy. But unfortunately, people, police in Uncle Sam's Land have to deal with this shit. So therefore, they have to, treat everybody as if they're armed and crazy. The wires is wired differently. The brain is wired differently. That's what you call crazy. You may call crazy, but if you go to, another part of the world where everybody's brain is wired that way, you can't call them crazy. Because when everybody is that way, then that's how they are. This is what I'm saying, that when brains are wired differently, if we can go back to the example of the wolf and the Labrador retrievers. To the Labrador retrievers, the wolves are crazy. And to the wolves, Labrador retrievers, golden Labrador retrievers seem crazy. They just don't understand each other. When the stick goes up, the Labrador retrievers get one message and behave one way. The wolves take another message from this raised stick and behave another way. And they both think the other one is crazy for behaving the way it does. That means a heterogeneous society doesn't work. They're both canine, but it doesn't work. Because the brain is wired differently. And this is not a matter that you can fix with education. It's not a matter that you can fix with education or, the environment. Wolf is wolf is the way his brain is wired to be a wolf. There is no amount of education or what I'm trying to is there's a specific word for it. It's environmental nurture. There is no amount. It's nature. The business of the way the brains are wired, the way people's perceptions are in the society, it's a lot of it is nature. Nurture is a small part of it. It's just I guess in conclusion what I'm trying to say is it seems Uncle Sam's managers are making the rest of the world suffer by inventing enemies, coming up with enemies, creating enemies, because it seems they have understood that if they can find, create, make an external enemy and distract their people domestically with an external enemy, they can keep the unity domestically. And if they can't find an external enemy, the unity may break, will go away, and there may be a breakup, like Miss Greeny has stated. Like the CIA guy at the beginning of my conversation, my monologue, like the CIA guy stated that he was reminiscing that how good it was after 9/11. I mean, a lot of people think 9/11 was a false flag, was a red flag, was a false flag operation, equivalent of a person slapping themselves in the face to create a specific impression, to play the victim. This is many people believe it. Maybe, maybe not, but many people, many learned individuals, based on their study of the what happened and how can two concrete high rises come down with two flimsy aluminium constructed planes. Uh, it doesn't make sense to them, didn't make sense to them, and there's a lot of evidence that that wasn't the case. The planes hit the buildings, but the planes were not the reason for the buildings coming down. Hitting the buildings is one thing, but collapse of those high rises that were enormous and very well constructed, many many learned people know it wasn't it would not have happened. It could not have happened just because those fragile planes hit them, and it was pre-planned for the buildings to come down. In fact, it's so clear that it was pre-planned. The indication is that there was a third building, building number 7, that came down, which no plane hit it, nothing happened to it, it just collapsed. Just, collapsed. And that's building number 7. And it wasn't a high rise, it wasn't like the two other ones, it was smaller, it was like 20 floors, and just in the broad daylight it just came down without anything touching it, just came down. And then they say the owner of the guy said that, yeah, it was the same time when these buildings were hit, and we talked to the fire department, and the fire department told us we should bring it down. Now, which fire department he's talking about? The same people who are not there to testify because so many of them perished when the big buildings came down. So there is no evidence that you can interview them. All the owner had to say was that those same people who perished were the same people I talked to, and they coordinated to bring down this tower as well. Now, we all know that bringing down such a building is out of the scope of fire department, and even if it was in the scope of fire department, there is no way that all those calculations and all those explosives and all those materials could be put together, brought together, designed, installed and implemented, that at the same time that those two buildings fall, this one would fall too. Because the owners, there's a video of him, video of the owner, the last owner of the World Trade Center. There is a video of him stating that while those two buildings were coming down, me and the fire department and blah 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 concluded that this third one also should come down because of stability issues, and so we brought the third one down ourselves, right within those few minutes that it took for the big buildings to come down. This doesn't make sense. Even if you decide that building should come down, it takes, at least a couple of weeks, couple of months to come up with the design of where to put the explosives, how to put the explosive, where to put it, how to put it, install it, prepare for it, execute it. That's not something you can do in a matter of half an hour. Anyway, the point is this, folks, if you have to keep creating external enemies in order to keep your unity, that's just too much suffering is taking place because you want to keep your unity. Too many people around the world have to suffer because you made them an enemy, created an enemy out of them, perceived an enemy out of them, drew an enemy out of them for your own people. in order to keep the internal unity, domestic unity. It's just, is that fair? Everybody around the world has to suffer because we need an external enemy to keep our unity.